Tonight, we introduce an alumni from our BFA in Fine Arts program. As Monday was Indigenous Peoples Day, and Samsoche will speak to indigeneity and community in his work, this is the place where I would deliver a land acknowledgement. Rather than that, I want to mention where I first heard of land acknowledgements. Some years ago, a former student of Cherokee and African American descent returned from study abroad and excitedly told me about the land acknowledgement she read carved into the walls of Flinders University in Australia. Her comment reminded me that over the years, several Native students have told me that they've searched at Columbia to meet other Native students, but could never make these connections, or only with difficulty. Despite the fact that Chicago is home to the third largest urban Indian population in the United States, with more than 65,000 Native Americans in the greater metropolitan area, students who arrive here at Columbia do not know how to easily connect with their Native peers. It's our hope that events like this tonight and tomorrow evening at the Dance Center will help change that. 2 years ago, we welcomed one Native artist to our Art Now series. And last year, a group of colleagues organized events with a Native artist, a Native scholar, and a First Nations writer. This is not yet enough, but it's the beginning of creating the space for Native artists and others on campus so that all our students might see themselves represented and begin finding ways to connect with one another. So now I'm going to introduce our artist for tonight. Samsoche Sampson is an interdisciplinary artist based in, and I realized I forgot to click through this. Samsoche Sampson is an interdisciplinary artist based in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. He was born and raised in Southern California and moved around the United States before settling in Minnesota. Samsoche has a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Columbia College, Chicago, and an Associate of Arts from Erie Community College. His work includes performances in creating traditional, contemporary dance and music fusions and visual art suffused with his indigenous cultural heritage. His work has been shown at Columbia College, Chicago, the Ware Center at Millersville University, and the Reif Performing Arts Center in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. Samsoche is also one half of the Sampson Brothers, where he performs alongside his brother Lumhe with a distinctive combination of the dance styles practiced in powwow with contemporary influences to create a unique fusion of tradition and new elements learned throughout their travels. And the Sampson Brothers will perform tomorrow night at 6 o'clock in the Dance Center. And if you're interested in attending that event, please do pick up one of the printouts with a QR code to register. And with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Samsoche.
Hello, my relatives. My name is Samsoche Sampson. As Joan mentioned, I'm a graduate from 2015 from the BFA program. It was funny because I was preparing this slideshow earlier, and I felt like I was having to get ready for class again, and the whole muscle memory came back. I'm like, oh, hope this is not late, or if I get good grade on this. So. And it was good to see everybody, and like I've seen some familiar faces and some of the faculty and some of the people that are still here and still rolling through the changes as we navigate this ever-changing world. This John kind of inadvertently gave me a cool outline to work my presentation. So. There we go. So yeah, I'm gonna go through a little bit of like my art process and a little bit of the mediums that I work in. On the left here, you'll see me in my regalia. And indigenous people or dancers, we refer to the outfits that you see as regalia. My brother likes to say, we don't wear costumes because costumes are for when you're trying to be something else. So regalia is an extension of who you are as an individual. When you go to a powwow or Native American ceremonies, you'll see a lot of regalia, and they're all unique and vibrant and different. And a lot of the colors and the designs, some of them are traditional family designs, some are newer. And the colors, they're all particular to that person's or that person's individuality. So it's really neat. You'll see a lot of regalia that are similar, but no two are the same. So it's a really cool, unique expression. The top right is finally, after graduating, I was able to finally create a body of work that kind of finished what I started here in Columbia. So after I graduated, I kind of bounced around a lot. I moved to Minneapolis. I was in Bloomington and Burnsville. And then I was in St. Paul, living in some artist lofts. And then when the pandemic happened and the George Floyd thing went down, my wife, she works for the U of M Extension, and they had an office up north in Grand Rapids. And so we were able to move up to where her tribe is located, and we were able to get a house and kind of build a life there. And I was finally able to create this whole body of work. And once I got it done, it kind of took on a life of its own. And now it just travels around the different galleries, and I've made some prints. I do have some prints, and I'll have to bring them in later. And then the bottom right is a photo shoot that I did with a photographer up there, and then her work is seen nationwide, and it was really cool to work with her. So a little bit about my story. I was born and raised in California I'll get into that a little bit more. Then back in 1997, I think it was. Yeah, it's a long time ago. My family, my mother, my brother, and my younger sister, we moved to Bismarck, North Dakota. And I went to high school up there for a few years, and we started a dance troupe for urban indigenous youth to teach them how to make regalia, how to dance a particular style that they wanted to learn more. From there, we moved to Minnesota for a bit. I was in the cities beforehand again. And then we moved to Wisconsin. I graduated high school from Wisconsin Dells, and I got to be friends with many of the Ho-Chunk, and that's the tribe in that area. And then from Wisconsin, we moved to upstate New York, and that's where my mother's tribe is from, the Seneca Nation. So we're on a reservation called Cattaraugus, and that's just south of Buffalo. I went to Haskell Indian Nations University. It's an all indigenous college, and that's in Lawrence, Kansas, and that was quite the experience in that, because that was a former boarding school as well, and we'll get into more of that later. And then from there, I went back to New York real briefly, got my associates, and then I started applying to art schools. So I applied to art schools in Florida, to Full Sail, to New York City Art School, and then to California Institute of Arts. And I got accepted to all of them, but why I chose Chicago, New York, I've traveled there a few times, and it's just way too many people. Cost of living is way crazy high, and it just smells funny. Florida is a little bit too far. It took me 2 days just to drive down there, so I'm that's too far. And California, I already grew up and been there, so I kind of knew what to expect. And I know that the cost of living is crazy high in California too, so Chicago became the happy medium, and it wasn't too far from me. And I was able to get a handle the culture shock of going to a big city like this. I was telling Joan earlier and Mimi, I was sometimes they have that thing where that freshman 15, or where you put on weight. The opposite happened for me. I lost 20 pounds because I was walking and running everywhere, and going from building to building, because all the classes are in different buildings. And once I got that figured out, it was a really cool thing, and I learned how to navigate that and finally make my way through. So now we're coming to the heritage part. So this is a little bit more of the background of the indigenous and my tribes. So my tribes is Muskogee Creek and Seneca. So Muskogee Creek is now in Oklahoma, but formerly Alabama, Georgia area prior to the Indian Removal Act, which is known as the Trail of Tears in the history books. So that's how the Creeks ended up in Oklahoma. They tried to do that with the Senecas too, but the Senecas are stubborn too, so they went right back up into New York, and then they had to make new treaties, and that's where the current reservations are. So a little bit about the historical context, and this all kind of leads into my artist process and sharing my story through my 2D and my performance art. So and this is kind of towards the end of what they call the Indian Wars, and this is when the the Plains Indians were finally getting subdued and forced onto the reservations. When that happened, a lot of the tribes tried to rekindle ceremony or tried to pray, and that's how the ghost dance came about. And a lot of tribes started adopting this ghost dance because it was given a way of resistance and trying to pray for hope or change and freedom. And what had happened is that the U.S. government was fearing a unified uprising of all the tribes. So what they did is they passed the Religious Crimes Code of 1883, which banned indigenous song and dance. And the only time that we were allowed to perform was for Wild West shows or for political campaigns. And that was the beginning of what we would know as powwow culture. And it's some of the dances kind of evolved as a reaction to that. And along with that banning of our culture was the boarding school era. And it's interesting too, because I was explaining to Deb and a few of my friends at the Center for Native Futures, is that now we're getting to share our stories more in the mainstream media. So I don't know if you guys have seen Reservation Dogs. It's on Hulu, FX, Yellowstone, 1893. And I work at a gallery up in Grand Rapids, and some of the older artists came to me, and they were watching 1893, and they were talking about there's an episode about the boarding schools, and they were asking me, it's did that really happen? I'm like, oh yeah, every indigenous person that you see today is a survivor or a descendant of a survivor from the era. And along with that became the Indian Relocation Act. So this was part of the government's extermination policies. So with that one, they removed a lot of indigenous folks from their reservations and their communities, and they relocated them into cities. And they were trying to give them vocational training. So that's how Chicago ended up with a large indigenous urban population. Los Angeles, San Francisco were other centers where a lot of natives are relocated to. We were forced here, and that was an effort to try to disconnect us from our culture and our land. And I think back in the late 80s, 90s, with the advent of casino compacts, a lot of the indigenous people went back to their reses. So it was oh, we got casinos now. So that was kind of what happened to a lot of them kind of moved back to their tribal areas. And brewing with that, the AIM movement kind of started going, and this was a reaction to all those these acts or laws that were passing. So AIM was the American Indian Movement. This started in Minneapolis. And this was a call to action to a lot of indigenous people living in these urban areas to reclaim their culture, reclaim their language, reclaim their lands. And it kind of came it was similar to the Black Panther movement. So it unified, it gave the indigenous people a voice. And they had what they called the longest walk. So it started out in California, and they marched all the way to Washington, D.C. And at the end of which, that's when the U.S. government finally passed the American Indian Religious Freedom Act of 1978. Now we were finally able to be who we were, our identity. We were free to practice our songs, our culture. And that's kind of what started to as I mentioned before, the powwow culture. So some of the dances that became from those Wild West shows actually transitioned to one of the dance categories that you'll see at powwows. This photo here is actually me and my brother. We grew up in Los Angeles, and our mother, as a way to keep us connected to our culture, kept us in the powwow, and we had a lot of teachers and a lot of mentors that we learned from along the way. And this one we're in looks like fancy dancing. So fancy dancing was one of those styles that came from the Wild West shows, where they add the second bustle. It's what I was dressing in the first or the second slide. And that was an adaptation for the Wild West shows because they thought our traditional dances were too boring and not exciting. So they asked those performers to spice it up. So that's when the second bustle got added, the brighter colors got added. And as new materials became available to us, we started incorporating those into our regalias. So communities, so this is like a huge one for indigenous people. So a lot of times my brother and I will get asked if we would teach non-indigenous institutions or dance centers, if we could teach our styles of dance to non-indigenous members. And my brother and I, we're very willing. We want to teach people that, and we want people to come in and join the community, because our mindset is one of openness and sharing. Like, we need to expand our community so we all acknowledge what happened and we know the histories and the reasons for these dances. But we don't want it to just be a one-off thing or a box to check off. So a lot of indigenous folks, like what we say is that you can learn all these dances, but if you don't have the support of your community or your tribe, then it will be seen as a wrong, as you're not allowed to do that. But if you become part of the community and you're in that community, then you have that support, the community, then they'll see you as a practitioner, or you're accepted, or you have that recognition or that acknowledgement to practice those dances. So this is an image from Reservation Dogs. And what's cool about this is the spirit in the center is actually my niece. My older brother, Tim, he passed away a few years ago, but his niece, she is working as a set designer. And it's cool because the original actress that was supposed to play that role, she ended up catching COVID. And she was the only one on set that could fit the dress that they had made for her. So she ended up being put into that role. And I was like, you did an amazing job. And like, I think you're going to get some more roles coming your way. And she just laughed and she's like, thank you. But this one kind of illustrates that too. So like when we perform for our communities, and our communities are always with us, or we carry them with us when we do go perform. And this is my family here. So on the right is a family picture. So that's my mother. Her name's Doris. That's me when I was little. My father, Will Sampson, and then my brother Lumhe there. And then this is my father's grandmother. Her name's Losana. I was asking my relatives in Oklahoma if they knew what year that was taken, because that's a pretty old photo. And then the bottom left here is there's the 5 siblings of us. So on the left is our older sister Andra, me, my brother Lumhe, and the back is our older brother Tim. Our niece Tava, she was the one that was in the dress in the spirit, and then our other older sister Pogi. And so how my family ended up in California. So I kind of say that my brother and I are actually like children of the AIM movement, because my grandmother had moved my mother and her sister to Berkeley, California. She was going to study American Indian history, and then she went on to get her nursing degree from there. And at the same time, this was the late 70s, so the AIM movement was going on at the same time, a lot of the occupation of Alcatraz. And my grandmother, like, she's going to Berkeley, and she was supposed to have family dorm apartment, but the college didn't have our living space available. So my grandmother and mother and aunt ended up having to stay at AIM members' house for like the first month, and they learned all the AIM songs, and Dennis Banks was like a regular helping my grandmother out. And I go, this is so crazy, because as I was mentioning with like indigenous people, where they say it's 6 degrees of separation to know everybody in the world. If you know the right Native person, it's like 1 degree separation. So if you do something good or bad, everybody's going to know about it. So, so better be on the up and up and be doing right, act right. And as I mentioned too, the community, like I have a lot of teachers like growing up from when I was little, growing up in Los Angeles and just moving throughout the country. So my mentors, and my first and foremost, is my mother. She's the one that taught my brother and I how to do a lot of what we do, and how to carry ourselves in a way that's grounded and respectful. My father, he passed away when I was 4. And then, so I had to learn about him through other people in a sense, but that also informed the way I do things, because I got to learn about him the way that everybody else has learned about him, like through his work and his films. Keith Secola is my brother's father-in-law, And he was like instrumental like in helping my brother and I form our current process of the way we perform. As I mentioned too, like a lot of powwow dances are very done in a traditional sense where you have a drum group, you have singers, and they have specific songs that they sing for each dance category. And my mother, she taught my brother and I how to move to different genres of music because she would go to do like Latin style dances. She did like modern style dance. And then we would go to different festivals and learn all these other dances. And we just learned how to read the music and how to move to the music. And that's how we were able to adapt outside of just being traditional dancers. So Kisakola came along and he's like, yeah, like you and your brother should come dance with us. And that led us to like traveling around the world. And we got to dance with like Brule, Jana, Kisakola, later on Frank Wan, Digging Roots. And we've just got to meet so many amazing people because we were able to take our dancing like outside of like that traditional songs. Norman Roach. Norman Roach was one of the mentors that taught my brother and I how to hoop dance. And he's also a really good fancy dancer. And he's the one that kind of showed us a lot of like the tricks and how the protocol for hoop dancing and like how to like always give more than you get. Tommy Lee Hickey, he was like a manny, like a male version of a nanny. And he was a flute maker. And when he was babysitting my brother and I, he would take us and show us how to make flutes. And he was taught by an older indigenous guy and like in his way of making flutes. So he gave me flutes every year. And like I never really picked them up till I was like maybe like 10 or 12 years old. And I kind of figured out how to play the flute. And then I figured out how to bend the music into other genres of music as I did with the dancing. Jonathan Windy Boy. So if you're in powwow country, like he's like known as like the best grass dancer. Like he was like unbeaten for like years. And so he was one of our mentors that when he was in California, he taught me and my brother how to do his style of grass dancing, which is a very old style. Butch Thunderhawk, he's an art teacher at United Tribes over in Bismarck, North Dakota. And he taught us like the Lakota stories and the Lakota style of art and the way they do things and the reason they do things. Merle Bear's Tail. She's another well-known powwow family, and along with like the fancy dancing coming up from the Wild West shows in the 60s and the 70s, a lot of women did the fancy dance as much as the men did. And it wasn't until like I think late 60s, early 70s when the women's fancy shawl became a category because they needed their response to the fancy feather dance. Wade Keepseagle, he was another mentor in North Dakota. He taught my brother and I how to make the regalia, how to do all the feather work, how to wrap the feathers, how to make the roaches. The roaches are the headdress that you see that on the other photo I have. Buffalo Child, he's a Cree native from Canada, from Saskatchewan. He taught my brother and I how to hoop dance as well. And when we started hoop dancing, we started with 5 hoops. And we would do like the whole street performance. So at the time we were in California, we would go to Venice Beach and we would perform on the beach and we'd put a blanket out. And it was funny because like we did the performance and so the blanket in powwow or indigenous culture is a way it's like a hat or a can for donations. And the audience didn't understand that the blanket was for donations. And some kids were just sitting on the blanket. Oh, there's a free upfront seat for us. So the guy's like, I was like, I don't think they understand what the blanket's for. I was like, well, I guess we got to tell them then. So my brother and I get out there and dance, and he's busy getting ready because he does like 32 hoops. And he was letting me and my brother do the pre-show or the warm-up. And by the time he got ready, my brother had got done performing and the audience was gone. I was like, you took too long. So yeah, and from there we started adding more and more hoops and we started doing our own shows. And my brother, he can do like a formation with like 52 hoops and for one formation. And it's impressive to see, but the reason we don't do it very often is because it takes a longer song to get that formation put together and then even longer song to get out of it. So So we tend to stay with like 8 to like 12 hoops. Collaboration. Like you need to have a circle of artists that inspire you, that help you to get your voice out there. So when I was going to Columbia, Haley's here. She was like one of the other few natives that we knew of. Frank Wan is another one. He's a very well-known hip-hop artist. He's a Sachango Lakota from Rosebud. And we met at the Chicago powwow when it was still at Navy Pier. And we just got to talking, and we were like, oh man, we should just like work together and collaborate. So Frank, he does the producing and the hip hop and the writing and the rapping. My brother, he's more of the dancer, so he does like the choreography and set design. And then myself, because I do graphic design and BFA stuff, so I did more of like the visuals and the artwork, and then I play flute too. So we combined our talents, and it really took off. So we met here in Columbia, and then once we got rolling, I think we were one of the first concerts at the house, and I think that was like 2013 or 2012, and it was a good experience. Like we had students from a full house from start to finish, and we had good reviews, good surveys. After that, we started getting bigger and bigger, and like it just kept going. We did South by Southwest in 2016. We were one of the performers there. But my one concern with South by Southwest is like they classified our group as world music when it was clearly hip hop. They're like, oh, they see Native American, it must be world music. So, and it was an interesting experience. It was really cool to be down there and among all the other artists. And then after that, we did shorts for ESPN. We did MTV. Frank got a highlight for MTV's Rebel Music, which was a really cool series if you follow that. And then after I graduated, my brother and I, we moved to Minnesota, and we still kept dancing, and we started adding more and more to our show. And then now my brother and I can just do a show on our own. If you guys come tomorrow, it's a really exciting show. It's a kind of a variety show. We have spoken word music, traditional hoop dancing, and modern hoop dancing. And you guys will get to see why, well, some of the faculty is like, why I had to skip class sometimes. But you guys will finally get to see what I do. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. And so I made it through with going to all the shows and still going to class, and got done. Yeah, so my brother and I, we got highlighted for, if you guys watch PBS's web series called If Cities Could Dance. So they asked my brother and I to represent for Minneapolis, and they wanted to do a Native American episode. And we did the episode, and it was really well received, and the web series itself has a few of the Webby Awards. And so if you want to look that one up, it's If Cities Could Dance Minneapolis. So that's the one that's about me and my brother. And then after we did that, and then we got approached by the TED Talk organization, and they have like the big TED Talks, and then they have the little regional local ones, which I think it's like TEDx. So they asked us to do one for Minneapolis again for Shift, which was shifting perspectives on what you thought you knew. So that was a really cool highlight. That was probably the most nervous I've ever been for like public speaking, because there was a bunch of very like high achieving people. So I was like, hopefully I don't mess up the words or mess up my flute. And it was just a lot of stuff. And then we finally did that, and it just felt like a big relief. We're like, we did it. Oh, this is my family here. So that's me on the right, my brother's oldest son, my sister's oldest son, my sister, one of her youngest, my mother in the middle with the blue and white, my brother's middle son, my sister's son, and the other twin, my oldest boy, the only granddaughter that my mom has out of 10 grandkids is just the one girl, my youngest guy, and then my brother and his youngest. So, and we're all of a performing family too, and that's like another lesson we teach when we do teach hoop dancing or dancing itself, is that you need to have that community support or that family support, otherwise you're not going to retain what you learned. So it's like the same as like you got to find your team that will keep you practicing what you're learning and doing, and keep pushing you to keep making more stuff. Now we get to my art. So that's kind of like the background of what informed my decision to create the pieces that you're going to see here. This was the two pieces I did for my BFA final thesis. So like we had to do a couple pieces for the gallery show for the finalists or the BFA seniors. And one of the classes I was in here, like they kind of were posing some questions of like, how do I merge my performing arts with a studio art or a fine arts art? And one of them, they gave me this concept, and it was called like a analytical abstraction. So if you're in like art history, and you'll have some of those paintings where they kind of like do the arrows of like the directions of the shapes or where the light's coming from. So I kind of like built up off of that concept where I would take images from our performances and I would kind of abstract them out to like just their basic shapes and or their direction. So I would layer them out where I would just start with like the most simple shape, and a lot of times it's like I use like the triangle, circle, and the rectangle, and I would just like start with the back and I'd build it up forward, and I would try to like capture the movement of the regalia or like those the direction of the regalia that was in it. So that's how I kind of created the movement. And then these kind of got really well received, and they're like, "Wow, I think you found your style, your niche." I was like, "Yeah." And so I've been carrying these around like as we were moving around Minnesota for like 6 years. And then when we finally got a house, I was able to turn the garage into a studio. And then I made like 8 more pieces, and then those became this body work that'll be right here. This is called Nimakagi. So that's an Ojibwe word or Anishinaabe word for dance for the people. So when you go to a powwow, the MCs and the arena director will tell the dancers, like, you're dancing for the people. You're dancing for the people that came before. You're dancing for the spirits and the people that are yet to come. And you're dancing for the people that can't dance. So you're dancing for the spirits. And so these are like various styles from around North America that you'll see at a powwow. And these are the ones that you would see at a powwow, but these are the ones that are really meant to be shared. These are the ones that invite the community to learn about or to experience. And every tribe that you see or know, they will still have their very sacred ceremonies that only members of the community will be invited to participate in or see. So these ones are the powwow styles. The top left is based off myself. This is the men's fancy feather. The next one over is a redo one of the original one, but this is the women's fancy shawl or the butterfly dance. The one in the middle of the top is an Ojibwe woodland traditional. So traditional style dance is probably the oldest style of the dance that you see at a powwow. So this dance tells a story of a battle or of a hunt. This one is a Iroquois version of a women's fancy shawl. This is based off of my mother and my niece, and I took a photo from when they were at the powwow. The top right is a hoop dancer based off Lumhe, and you'll get to see that tomorrow. Bottom left is another redo of the original one. This is the women's jingle dress. And then the next one is another old style. This is called the grass dance. And this originated on the plains with the Omaha people. That's like in Nebraska, Missouri area. And this dance was like kind of like the young men's dance. So like the scouts, they would go find a place to set up their camp or their where the people were going to move to. So they would use these long sweeping movements, and then they would tie the grass onto their regalia, and then that would kind of decorate their regalia. And so like their movements are supposed to emulate the grass blowing on the plains. The middle one down here is a men's smoke dance, and this is from my tribe. This is based off my cousin. And so when you see this, the headpiece that they wear is called gastoat, or their headdress. And the feather will actually tell you what tribe of the 6 nations that they're from. So the single feather up is Seneca, 3 is Mohawk, 1 up, 1 down, I think is Cayuga. The one without feathers is Tuscarora. And then I think the other ones is Onondaga and Oneida, and they'll have a different feather position too. The next one over is this is an old style jingle dress style painting representation. So The jingle dress is a healing dance. So in early 1900s, when there was a sickness among the people, and this originated with the Anishinaabe out of like northern Minnesota and Canada. So this young girl had this vision and a dream of this dress that made a sound when it moved. And before they had access to, they use snuff can lids and they roll them up into cones. But before that, they had like rabbit bones and small deer bones, and they would adorn the dress with that. So when it moved, it made like this sound of rain, and that's supposed to be like. And there's a specific song then that they sing that, and it's supposed to heal the community. And when she did this, it did heal the community. Bottom right here, this is the women's smoke dance, and their dress is very informed by the Quaker people. So that was like the prevalent colonizer settlers in the area. So that they kind of influenced the way some of our indigenous faith keeping. So they have a savior, and it's kind of like has Christian analogies in there. So this is kind of like how I do a little bit of the process. So I find a photo, and then that I like the lines, or I like the composition. Then I'll take and abstract it out, and then like the colors of the regalia kind of inform the colors of the dancers, and then the background kind of reflects of where the dancer is from. So these being Iroquois or Seneca, these are from like the woodlands area. So I have like more of like triangles and so to represent the trees in the forest, and most of them you'll see they're on like a little rectangle. I throw the rectangle in there as kind of like a representation of like the stage, because a lot of times you'll see just the dancers on the stage. This is like a process. So my wife got me an iPad Pro for my birthday one year, like about 5 years ago. And it's like the most amazing tool for sketching or creating compositions, because then you don't have to waste materials of figuring out what colors you like or don't like. So I start in the top left, and this is like a sketch on the iPad. And then once I find the composition I like, I'll project it onto a canvas and to get the proportions right. And then I'll start taping it off, and then I'll take an X-Acto knife and just ever so gently cut out pieces of the tape to create the shapes. And then I'll just start layering it up. And yeah, that's pretty much how that goes. And this is like the finished one. This is probably my favorite one. Like I put this one up in my living room. And these are like other art mediums I do. So with the regalia that you see, like for indigenous people, it's like the whole thing is like an art piece. They're different styles and mediums. So, and you'll see a lot of beadwork, and a lot of like indigenous artists are taking that beadwork concept and they're like beading everything. They're beading shoes, they're beading canvases, they're beading boots, they're beading hats. So like they're taking that style, and that's how they're kind of like reinventing it in a sense. So, but this is more of a traditional one. And that's how it kind of shimmers and glows. And this is kind of like also like the other mediums that I do. I do theater, I also do music, and then do public performances. Top left here is when we did the South by Southwest show. The one next to it with my hand up is we did a artist showcase with Raw. They do showcases in like Chicago, Minneapolis, New York, and LA, I think. This is with Frank and I. We were in, I think, we did a lot of like shows at a lot of the venues in Chicago area where a lot of like bands do like their pay their dues and get their experience. So this is like one of those shows. This top right one is when we did the TED Talk. This one we were opening up for Rise Against. So it's like my cool 90s grunge. I listened to Nirvana photos. This middle one I was doing a play called Res Sisters, and I had to play the role of the trickster or the master of the game, and that was fun. Bottom right one is when my brother and I did the filming for If Cities Could Dance. So that one's a really cool one too. If you guys want to check that out, it's like a 5-minute video, and I kind of use it as like my little promo, like electronic press thing. So it's kind of cool because it kind of tells what we do in a real 5-minute show. And I just want to thank you guys for coming and hanging out with me tonight. And I just a few parting words is like, as an artist, like I commend you guys all for taking a leap to following what your passions are and being an artist. It's not going to be a straight line of success. It's going to go like this. Like you're going to be really busy sometimes, or you're going to be really struggling, and but you'll get there. I was talking to Haley and Deb and Noel, and they're like, "Well, you got to share that. Like you're a dad, you have 2 kids, you got a career, you're still able to do art. Your wife has got a career. You guys kind of balance each other out, and like so, yeah. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and you can do it. So it's fun. So yeah, there's a little bit of photos of like my kids now. And, the ones in the middle are kind of fun because like I met my wife when I was a tenant here, and this is like 10 years ago. And then the one on the right's like last week. So so yeah. And then on the right too, my oldest son, like whenever I pull out the paints or the art, he has to do art too. So it's pretty cool. So yeah, thank you guys. Mado, Nyawe, Miguich, thank you. Come to the show tomorrow. It's going to be exciting. We're doing a workshop in the early afternoon. So yeah, thank you again.